The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, just as my father raised an old yellowed passbook into the air, like it was a dirty rag nobody wanted to touch. The ballroom exploded with cruel laughter while he smirked proudly into the microphone, ready to humiliate me one final time in front of Boston's elite. "Trash belongs with trash," Richard Mercer announced coldly, before tossing the fragile passbook straight into a silver bucket overflowing with melting ice and expensive champagne. My wedding guests laughed loudly while icy liquid swallowed the only thing my grandfather had secretly placed into my hands minutes earlier. I didn't scream or cry the way everyone expected me to. Instead, I dropped to my knees in my white wedding dress and plunged my bare hand into the freezing bucket to rescue the soaked pages. Champagne dripped from my fingers while mascara ran down my cheeks, and silence slowly spread through the ballroom. My father watched with satisfaction, because humiliating me had always been his favorite form of entertainment. Grandpa Samuel stood quietly near the back of the room with tears filling his tired old eyes. He looked heartbroken, not because of the ruined book, but because he knew exactly what my father had just thrown away. I clutched the dripping passbook against my chest and walked out of the ballroom without looking back once. Nobody followed me except the sound of mocking laughter echoing behind the closing doors. 3 days later, I stepped into the First National Bank in downtown Boston carrying the ruined passbook inside a plastic Ziploc bag. The pages were wrinkled, stained, and smelled faintly like champagne and betrayal. I was 29 years old and invisible to most people around me. As a trauma nurse, I spent my life quietly cleaning wounds, while louder people took all the credit. The young bank teller barely glanced at me when I slid the bag across the polished counter. She looked more interested in my thrift store coat than the ruined book resting inside the plastic. "I just need to check the balance," I said softly while trying to ignore the nervous shaking in my hands. The teller typed lazily at first, expecting an empty account or some forgotten savings balance. Then her expression changed completely. The color drained from her face while her fingers froze above the keyboard like she had just seen a ghost. "Ma'am, please wait here," she whispered nervously before rushing away from the desk. Within seconds, 2 senior executives hurried toward me with stunned expressions on their faces. They didn't treat me like a poor nurse in a cheap coat anymore. They treated me like someone carrying a secret powerful enough to change lives. The regional director personally escorted me through a heavy steel vault door into a private room filled with old records and leather chairs. My heartbeat thundered inside my chest while I waited for answers. "Miss Mercer," the director finally said carefully while placing a thick file on the table. "Your grandfather created a Totten Trust in your name over 40 years ago." I stared at him silently while he continued explaining the unbelievable truth hidden inside the ruined passbook. Grandpa Samuel had invested early in Apple and Microsoft and never touched the profits once. Every dividend had quietly compounded for decades without anyone in the family knowing. Not even Richard Mercer had bothered opening the account to check what was inside. The director slowly turned the documents toward me and pointed at the final number printed in bold black ink. The trust was now worth $12,400,000. My entire body went numb while I stared at the impossible number sitting on the page. My father had mocked and drowned a fortune because his arrogance blinded him completely. Suddenly, memories of my childhood flooded back into my mind like poison breaking through a dam. I remembered kneeling on hardwood floors while my father forced me to scrub spilled scotch from his study. Richard never shouted when he wanted to hurt someone. He preferred smiling cruelty because humiliation entertained him far more than anger ever could. My older brother Hunter used to laugh while I cleaned up messes around the house like a servant. My father always repeated the same rule: girls clean while boys conquer. Grandpa Samuel once tried helping me stand after my knuckles started bleeding from scrubbing too hard. Richard threatened to throw him into a nursing home if he touched the cleaning rag again. Sitting inside that quiet bank vault, I finally realized something life-changing. I wasn't powerless anymore, and my father no longer controlled the story. When I arrived home, my husband Luke was buried beneath spreadsheets and financial reports spread across the kitchen table. He looked up slowly with the expression of a man who had uncovered something dangerous. Luke specialized in forensic financial analysis and corporate fraud investigations. If secrets existed inside numbers, he knew exactly how to find them. "Your father isn't wealthy," Luke said while turning his laptop toward me. "He's drowning in debt and desperately hiding it from everyone." The Mercer Empire wasn't a thriving business empire at all. It was a collapsing pyramid of fake loans, shell companies, and financial lies held together by reputation alone. The Newport mansion faced foreclosure proceedings, while federal auditors circled closer every week. Richard Mercer needed money immediately, or his entire fake empire would collapse publicly. My phone rang before I could process everything Luke had uncovered. The caller ID displayed only one name that still made my stomach tighten with fear. Dad. Richard's voice sounded smooth and confident like always. He claimed he wanted to help me sell Grandpa Samuel's small seaside cottage for my own benefit. But Luke quickly uncovered the truth hidden beneath his fake concern. The cottage was the last clean asset Richard could liquidate, before federal investigators froze everything else. When I refused to sell the property, his voice transformed instantly into something darker and more vicious. He threatened lawsuits, probate court, and public accusations of elder abuse against me. I should have been terrified, but instead I felt something unfamiliar rising inside my chest. For the first time in my life, I realized my father was the frightened one. Luke and I spent the next 24 hours building the perfect trap. We prepared legal-looking documents designed to expose Richard's crimes the moment he signed them. Then I called my father back and pretended to be scared, confused, and completely helpless. I became the weak little girl he always believed I would remain forever. I told him about the $12 million hidden inside Grandpa Samuel's trust account. The silence on the other end of the phone revealed his greed faster than words ever could. Richard immediately offered to protect me from taxes and federal scrutiny by transferring the money into the Mercer family trust. In reality, he planned to steal every dollar to save himself from prison. He arranged for us to meet during his prestigious Man of the Year charity gala in downtown Boston. My father wanted witnesses surrounding him while he claimed my inheritance as part of his fake success story. The grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, expensive suits, and political power when I arrived that Saturday night. But this time I wasn't hiding quietly in the background anymore. I wore a striking red dress and walked confidently through the crowd while whispers followed behind me. Even Hunter stared in shock because he had never seen me look powerful before. Richard pulled me aside near the stage and greedily demanded the transfer documents. He barely glanced at the paperwork before signing every page without reading the fine print. What he actually signed was a legal affidavit accepting full responsibility for decades of hidden offshore fraud and tax crimes. His arrogance blinded him so completely that he never noticed the trap closing around him. Seconds later, Richard stepped onto the stage and proudly announced a historic $12 million expansion of the Mercer Foundation. The ballroom erupted with applause while Luke electronically submitted the signed evidence directly to federal authorities. Suddenly, the giant LED screen behind my father flickered violently before displaying a bright Department of Justice seizure notice. The applause died instantly as armed IRS agents stormed through the ballroom doors. Richard screamed my name while agents locked handcuffs around his wrists in front of Boston's most powerful people. For the first time in my life, I watched fear replace the cruelty in his eyes. 3 weeks later, I sat peacefully on the porch of Grandpa Samuel's restored seaside cottage beside Luke, while ocean waves crashed nearby. Richard's empire was gone. Hunter accepted a plea deal, and the inheritance remained untouched because true power was never the money itself. Family is not defined by blood, wealth, or the people who humiliate you in public when life becomes difficult. Please subscribe and share our channel. We made videos for you,